Greg woke up with a pounding headache, an uncomfortable weight pressing down on him. The room was dark, the dim morning light barely seeping through the thin curtains. A sense of unease filled his chest, heavier than his own heartbeat, and a chill ran down his spine. Something was wrong, he could feel it. He turned over, expecting to find the warm, familiar sight of his bedside clock or the pile of books he'd been meaning to read. Instead, his eyes fell on 3 small, crumpled pieces of paper resting beside him. At first he thought they were trash, old receipts maybe, that he'd carelessly tossed there. But as his vision focused, he realized they were each scribbled with a message written in a shaky hand and on filthy, stained toilet paper. The first note read, "They are coming for you." His heart skipped a beat and he felt a strange tightening in his chest. Was this some kind of sick joke? His hands shook as he unfolded the second note. "Check under the bed." Greg's breathing grew shallow. Who would leave these here? He tried to remember what he'd done last night, but his mind was foggy. He'd been having these blackouts for weeks now. Patches of time disappearing from his mind like torn pages from a book. The third note was the strangest of all. "You have to wear a red t-shirt." He looked down at his own grey sleep shirt, feeling the urge to tear it off. What was so important about a red t-shirt, and why did he feel this creeping dread spreading through his body? Greg's eyes drifted back to the second note. He didn't want to. Every part of his brain screamed not to look, to get out of bed, grab his phone and call someone, anyone. But the curiosity clawed at him like an itch he couldn't ignore. Swallowing hard, he lowered himself to the floor and peered beneath the bed. There in the darkness was a red t-shirt. He didn't remember owning a shirt like that, and it looked old, almost like it had been used. Dark stains covered the fabric, and the sight of it made his stomach turn. He reached out and touched it, and it felt stiff and cold, as if it had been soaked in something thick and sticky and left to dry. With trembling hands he picked up the shirt. He felt an overwhelming urge to put it on, like the instructions on the note were somehow taking control of him. The cotton was stiff and itchy against his skin, but as soon as he pulled it over his head, a strange calm settled over him, almost like the shirt had been waiting for him. The moment the shirt touched his skin, everything changed. The fog in his head lifted and memories flooded back, memories he didn't want to remember. They hit him all at once, sharp, painful flashes of the night before. He saw himself walking down a dark alley, a figure ahead of him, a man. He was following him slowly, quietly. He couldn't remember why, but there was something wrong about it. Greg's breath hitched. He remembered feeling a rush, a strange power as he followed the man. He didn't know where he was going or why he was doing it, but he couldn't stop himself. The man had turned a corner and Greg had moved faster. The man hadn't noticed him yet. Then came the moment when everything turned dark. Greg remembered grabbing something, a sharp object, cold in his hand. He couldn't remember where it came from, but it was in his grip, and it felt right. He had stepped forward just as the man turned around. The man's eyes widened in surprise and fear, but it was too late. Greg had acted without thinking, stabbing the man once, then again, then again. The blood had splattered on his hands, on his clothes, on the ground. The man fell to his knees, gasping, and Greg stood there, watching, smiling, like it wasn't really him. The world felt blurry, like a nightmare. But it wasn't a nightmare. It was real. He had killed him. Greg had killed someone. The memory hit him like a punch to the gut. He felt sick, dizzy, like he might pass out. His knees buckled, and he nearly fell to the floor. But the red t-shirt seemed to hold him steady, like it was giving him strength. Before he could process what had happened, there was a knock at the door, loud, urgent. The words from the notes echoed in his mind. "They are coming for you." Greg froze. He didn't want to open it. He couldn't face what was out there. He wanted to run, but where to? Before he could even decide on the next course of action, the door swung open, and there they were, men in red t-shirts just like his. Each held a note, filthy and crumpled, like the ones that had been on his bed. Their faces were blank, expressionless. The men swarmed into the room and surrounded him. One of them spoke, their voice smooth and calm. "You've done well, Greg." Their words felt heavy, like they were sealing something inside him. "We've been waiting for you." Greg couldn't speak. He wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but his body was frozen, as if the red t-shirt had tied him to the spot. The knife was still in his hand. He hadn't realized it, but it was there, just like it had been the night before. He looked down at it, the cold steel shining under the light. It was the same knife he had used. Then it hit him. They weren't strangers. They were part of it, part of whatever had happened to him. They were part of him now. The blackouts, the urges, the killings. They had all been leading him here to this moment. They were like him. Or maybe he was like them. Greg's heart pounded as they circled him. They weren't just watching him, they were waiting. He understood now. The red t-shirt was more than just a shirt. It was a symbol, an initiation, a step into something darker, something he couldn't escape from.